Let's go to our last caller here. Sean, all right, so you get another hand from Aria or something like that, right?
I do. I have another hand from the Aria 510. I'm the effective stack with 8850. And just a bit of background, there's a VIP who's at the table, very splashy, just drinking and just playing really crazy, really, honestly.
Okay, so there's a VIP, which means kind of I mean, these guys used to be around a lot more back in the day. It's pretty rare now. I don't know how often you see it. I hear these stories about like March Madness in Vegas and New Year's, but I haven't seen much of it. But 510 uncapped at the Aria, okay.
Yeah. And just to note as well, I think the best player at the table is in the small blind.
Okay.
Um, so the VIP missed the straddle, and so he just blind opens to $50
From what position?
from under the gun.
Oh, he just didn't put the straddle in by
Yeah,
accident
he
or
didn't put the
something?
straddle. Yeah, he missed the. I think he was playing around on his phone,
Okay.
and he was like, "Oh, I missed the straddle. I'm just gonna blind raise," and he blind raised to 50.
Okay.
I'm under the gun +1. I have the king of spades, king of clubs, and I decide here to just call because there was infinite amounts of three betting and four betting, all this type of stuff happening at the table.
So you have black kings. Black kings.
Yeah, black kings, correct.
So because when you emailed this in, I was like, oh, it's interesting. You flatted here because it's not a play. So you're trying to set something up here where you think that somebody is going to try to squeeze because it's obvious that you're calling against a blind open, which in itself is a little bit suspect if people are zoning in. Why is a guy calling against a blind open?
Right.
But
Listen, I feel like that I have to have some hands that I can back, some strong hands that I can back raise with at the end. And so I thought this was the perfect opportunity where I could end up back raising and with a very strong hand. However, that's not really what happened.
yeah,
Um, so now everybody else folds. It gets to the button. Button three bets to 275, and the small blind, who in my opinion was the best player at the table, he now four bets to 700.
so it goes 275
Yep,
so button three bets at 275, small blind four bets to 700.
700,
Uh huh.
correct. Big blind now he kind of tanks for about a minute, and then he starts counting out his chips, and then he five bets to 2050.
What? Oh my
Yeah.
god.
So the under the gun folds now, who's the VIP. And normally this, I was trying to set this up so that I could squeeze here, but I don't think that kings here is a six, I don't think it's a six bet. I think it's just
I
call,
mean, isn't
or
it? Could it be a fold?
it could
Uh,
sometimes be a fold. I would say in a proper game this would be a fold. However, considering that, the open was by the VIP and it was a blind, I didn't count that really as a raise.
Yeah, it's interesting how you sort of you would how you'd sort of look at this hand in terms of big blinds. You could just almost look at it like it's $50 in the big blind, in which case you're less than 200 bigs deep,
Right.
right? And
Right.
at that
Correct.
point, but it's just so you've got this whole dynamic of button to 275 small and this is just you just sort of waking up here because the table hadn't been sort of crazy in this spot.
Correct.
This is just like a crazy thing. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with jamming here too, because of the fact if people are playing it like. But geez, I mean, again, I don't know if
Can I
I've
ask you? I mean, if I jam here, am I really ever getting called by worse?
probably not. But at a certain point, though, you're still picking up like 3,000. You're just picking up almost. I mean, I know it's not a tournament, but you're still picking up like a bunch of money, and you're denying equity. So at a certain point, definitely in a tournament, you'd want to do that. Wouldn't matter, right? So you decide with a call here as a continue.
Yeah, I decided just to. I mean, I thought about it and then decided just to call and evaluate.
So what's going to happen
And
if somebody just jams behind you and then you get a
well,
call?
I mean, I thought that basically, in my opinion, I mean, the only action that was left was the button and the small blind, right? And if any of them had any type of action at all, I just fold. I could
So
just
if you
fold them
if you call and the button like goes all in and then you
all
get a
in.
call, you're just
Yeah,
you're just going
I
to
just
fold at that
fold. I
point.
fold kings, thinking that
Yeah,
I'm
because you
never
still
good
have six
here.
thousand left. I mean, at that point,
Right.
I think it is
It's
a fold for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So the button folds and the small blind now calls, which is interesting because, in my opinion, the small blind is probably the only person who has an absolutely uncapped range here. I think everybody else's ranges is capped. However, the small blind, I mean, he four bet to 700, and he could be calling with a wide variety of hands now just because of the price he's getting.
But I mean, you think that he's going to jam with like aces, though, right?
Yeah, I think 100% he's
Yeah.
jamming with aces, but there's a lot of like bluffs that he could have.
Oh, you mean you think he might getting priced in with a wider range? You mean something
Yeah,
like that?
with a much wider range. Yeah.
I mean, he is out of position, and I mean, it is still 1,300 more for him to call. I mean, 2K call 45. Let's see, 700. Yeah, let's see here, 2,000 call 47, 5,000. I guess it's 5,013 for him to call. So
Right.
that's interesting. So the pot's like what,
4 or
6,400?
500. Yeah, 6,400.
6,400, and you have one pot size bet left.
Correct.
Okay.
So the flop comes 2 of clubs, 4 of spades, jack of hearts.
Jack of hearts, 4 spades, 2 of clubs. Okay.
Right. Small blind checks, big blind bets, 1,600, and I decide to call.
This kind of sounds familiar with a hand that we did before where somebody folded king. I don't know, a couple weeks ago, somebody folded kings. I mean, at this point, you don't get an ace to flop. He bet 16 into 64. The pot's 8,000. You're only going to have 5,400 left. I think I would just go with, I mean, I would just probably just go with it here, or
right.
I don't think I'm going to fold.
I think this is where I made it. This is why I messed up this hand. I made a big mistake here because I just thought, listen, I'm just going to call, and I'm just going to call down, basically.
You mean you're just going to try to like make it look like you have something that might fold? I mean, again, he bet 16 into 64. If you call, the pot's 96, and you have like, I want to say like somewhere around 5,000 left. So that's why I'll probably jam. Hero calls.
Yeah,
okay.
That's correct. Yeah. So I call, and the small blind calls as well.
The small blind calls as well?
Yeah, he calls as well.
Oh my God. Well, it's interesting because he is getting a huge price now, right?
Right.
Like you said.
He's getting a huge price, and also he's the one that could have like jacks and those type of hands. You know, he could easily have jacks and hands of that nature in his range.
So the pot is like 11,200, and you only have like
54 or 500 left, I think.
Okay.
The turn is the 4 of clubs, and the small blind checks again.
I mean, that's got to be. I don't know how you can ever. Yeah. Okay.
Small blind checks again. Now the big blind checks, and I really, at this point, my biggest concern was the small blind.
Shove it in, Sean. Shove it in.
No,
you only have 5,000 left.
I checked back. I know it was terrible.
God,
it was terrible. Terrible.
I mean, you only have 5,000 left. The pot's 11-2. I mean, you're just gonna be scared of one combo of Jack. This is kind of similar to that hand from 3 or 4 weeks ago. Wow. So hero checks back.
Yeah, and the river is the 10 of diamonds.
So final board is Jack of hearts, 4 spades, deuce of clubs, 4 clubs. River is the 10 of diamonds. Pot is 11,200 after a 5-bet pre. Small bet call. Turn gets checked around on a brick 4. The river now is a 10. Okay.
Yeah. Small blind now jams, and the big blind tank calls.
So small blind. So did these guys have deeper stacks than you too?
So the big blind had around about the same amount as I did, and the small blind covered us both.
So the small blind is basically shoving for like 5,000, right?
Yeah, he's shoving for 53 or 400. Yeah.
All right, so I'll put 5,300. So small blind shoves for 5,300. Big blind calls, and now the pot is like 21
like $1 million.
I can't fold given these pot. You're getting like 4-1, and it got checked around. I mean, I know. I don't know if the small blind can even peel here with 10-10 overcall the flop, even though the guy used really small sizing. I just, especially with a pocket pair, because it doesn't really. If he's behind you a pocket pair on the flop, there's less of a chance that he can improve. We always talk about that it's actually better to connect with the board because you could have a 5-out draw. Like it would much better to overcall with Jack 10 as opposed to 10-10 on Jack 4 deuce. So I mean, he shouldn't. If you're saying he's a good player, really shouldn't have 10-10 here. So he's really. I mean, I guess just Jack or 4x, but I would have shoved the turn all in, and I don't know. I can't fold given the pot odds.
Right. It's a terrible play for me. I mean, being results oriented, it was terrible. Um,
And what happened?
yeah, I when the big blind called, I just thought like I'm likely losing to one of them, so I decided to fold.
Wow. Oh boy. What are the results?
Yeah, so the small blind had Jack of clubs, 10 of clubs.
So he's got Jack
So
10.
he turned that top two. Um,
Is he doing that for value or I don't.
no, he was doing that as a bluff. He said I had all the blockers to everything, and I just thought I could bluff here. He didn't think that he thought that if he could get through the big blind, which is who he thought had the best hand, then I would also fold.
And then what does the big blind have, like queens or something?
Big blind had queens.
Oh no.
Yeah, yeah. It was
Oh God.
disgusting, disgusting
Wow, that's
spot.
crazy. You would have got the call on the turn too from Jack 10 of clubs, right?
Right,
If you shove
absolutely.
turn.
Yeah, yeah, because he has a flush draw top
It's
two. I
interesting.
mean,
It's interesting. I'm just going back. I mean, it's just kind of interesting. If you shove flop, if the small blind's any type of player, of course you should fold
he's
Jack.
folding, of
Right.
course.
So,
Yeah,
but then the question is, should the big blind call with queen? But you didn't really have that much. I mean, you started with he bet 16 into 64, and you only had another say six, so it would have been like 14,000. Like four, he probably has to call with queen on the flop too, getting that price even.
I think the problem was that listen, there's a lot of three betting and some four bet bluffing, but when it gets five bet, at that point you're just kind of like, all right, like worst case scenario, he has, in my opinion, I'm thinking he has ace king suited and possibly kings plus. Really, I mean, you shouldn't really have queens here. Um, and I
Yeah,
know that I
that's
have
crazy.
kings, so he, that obviously only leaves one combo of kings, but he could have tank called with aces here, right? I mean, he was the five better, the big blind.
Well, and then going back to pre-flop again, like you said, you mean if the big blind's any type of player, he should not call to a back jam for with this dynamic with queen as a six bet. If you back jam, even though you pick up 3,000-4,000, but I think you would have got money in either on the flop from the big blind or on the turn. I mean, I think the turn is almost the most egregious part of this because on the turn, I think I'm just jamming here, especially when your hand is vulnerable to some ace X that you just kind of want to fold. I mean, the pot's 11,200 at that point against three people. You want to protect your equity. You probably would have get called by the Jack 10 of clubs, and at the end,
But
I
can I
can't.
ask you a question, Bart? Like the big blind, should he ever? I mean, he should never have queens here, right? Like he should have ace, king, kings, and aces here.
You mean you think he should have just folded to the four bet queens pre-flop?
Well, I mean, I don't think he should be five betting with queens.
Well, I mean, a lot of people aren't going to play a cold four bet call. It's either going to be a five bet or a fold, right? They want to drive people out. So if he wanted to continue, he put the extra bet in. I don't think it's that egregious. It's kind of very dicey in that spot for the big blind. If I think like if I'm the big blind and I think Sean, you're capable of being up to something where you call the blind open, so there's a chance you might have something crazy, and then it goes three bet, four bet. I mean, I guess you could make a case for sometimes even folding queen, but it's kind of a weird spot for that guy. But him five betting there, I don't think is that crazy. And then I think he probably just was like, wow, I just got called in two spots. And your hand looks really strong when you call the flop, so he probably thought
Right.
he was beat. But then when you check back the turn, I mean, I guess you could add Jack's full. That's I guess small blind says he's bluffing with Jack 10, which is that's interesting because you wonder if that. I mean, that beats Ace Jack. That's got and it's not going to get a fold from an overpair. So I wonder about that play from the small blind at the end. But interesting spot as always, Sean. Thank you very much
I
for the call.
appreciate you. Thanks a lot, Bart.
All right.